Okay, so we're going to continue talking about the Psalms. We are on Psalm 58, which is titled, God Who Judges the Earth. To the choir master, according to Do Not Destroy, a Michtam of David. Do you indeed decree what is right, you gods? Do you judge the children of man uprightly? No. In your hearts you devise wrongs. Your hands deal out violence on the earth. The wicked are estranged from the womb. They go astray from birth, speaking lies. They have venom like the venom of a serpent, like the deaf adder that stops its ear, so that it does not hear the voice of charmers, or of the cunning enchanter. O God, break the teeth in their mouths, tear out the fangs of the young lions, O Lord. Let them vanish like the water that runs away. When he aims his arrows, let them be blunted. Let them be like the snail that dissolves into slime, like the stillborn child who never sees the sun. Sooner than your pots can feel the heat of the thorns. Whether green or ablaze, may he sweep them away. The righteous will rejoice when he sees the vengeance. He will bathe his feet in the blood of the wicked. Mankind will say, surely there is a reward for the righteous. Surely there is a God who judges on earth. Okay, so what can we say of this psalm here? So in the first verse, do you indeed decree what is right, you gods? I think a big piece of this psalm is a bit of an attack on the polytheism of the day. That is, do you indeed decree what is right, you gods? This question, small g, God. It is sort of a rhetorical question that's proposed to these guys, because the answer is obviously not. Do you judge the children of man uprightly? The answer, verse 2, no. In your hearts you devise wrongs, and your hands deal out violence on the earth. And so it's an interesting thing. I think polytheism is not entirely useless, given the expansion of human thought into more of a centralizing belief. But it is interesting to reflect on the gods of the ancient world and the cults that were produced around them. Of course, the gods and their exploits, their lives, are wound up in a narrative, just as the Bible is wound up in a narrative, and it explains certain things to us, certain truths to us, perhaps certain problems that we have yet to solve. And of course they ran into a bit of a predicament. I suppose we continue to run into this predicament of pluralism, unable to unite people, even though that in the modern day we have more or less universal religions, monotheistic religions, very strongly unitary and uniting. We have still found a way to fracture them, and the effects, I think, not completely similar, but some effects are similar to that of the days of polytheism, is that there is no true consensus. There's no way to walk. This is sort of all against all. The gods of the old world, the ancient world, did not possess any virtue. They did things because they wanted to do them. And often they brought havoc and destruction upon the people that worship them. In verse 3, there is an idea here that's put forth, not one that we have not heard before in Christian terms, but the wicked are estranged from the womb. They go astray from birth, speaking lies. And so this idea that as man emerges into life, the potential for sin, the potential for moving away from the path of righteousness is always, at every time, a temptation. That it's very close to saying that, of course, humanity are fallen beings. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are doomed to walk in the false direction. But it does mean that we will all suffer that temptation at some point in our lives, no matter how strong our upbringing is. This estrangement, this separation of, will find us eventually. I think the analogy of the womb and the implication of childhood and of innocence is apt. It's an apt example. Primarily because in this state, one is susceptible to anything, any type of influence. And since the path of the righteous is more of an upright, it's a path of understanding. It requires a process. To the young mind, to the undirected mind, to the plastic mind, I think this path can be quite difficult to walk. And as such, I think it leads many into the realm of temptation and being brought away. Verse 4, they have venom like the venom of the serpent. So this, of course, referring to the wicked that are estranged from the womb. And so this analogy here, this venom of the serpent, I think, has something to do with the individual. Again, going back to what we were talking about before with polytheism and of pluralism, of that you have this species now that is very venomous. It stops its ear so that it does not hear the voice of the charmers or of the cunning enchanter. On one hand, that's good, because you don't want to hear the charmers or the cunning enchanter, because they will manipulate you for their own desires and their own purposes. But this venomous snake is also resistant to the words of the upright, as they're so primarily individualistic, atomized, and they utilize their venom, the thing they've developed over the years, to corrupt those around them to their wicked ways. And so they're at once saved from the charmers and of the cunning enchanters, but they are also relegated to poverty, and that they cannot move from their primary way of being into some higher status. They're ever stuck in their ways. And so verse 6, O God, break the teeth in their mouths, tear out the fangs of the young lions, O Lord. Let them vanish like the water that runs away. When he aims his arrows, let them be blunted. Let them be like the snail that dissolves into slime, like a stillborn child who never sees the sun. So, no shortage of analogies here about the desire for these unhearing, wicked types to vanish into nothingness. And certainly to have the effects of their ways be minimized. I like to pick apart verse 9 because it is an interesting series of words here. Sooner than your pots can feel the heat of thorns, whether green or ablaze, may he sweep them away. And so, I'm not entirely sure what to make of this verse. Sooner than your pots can feel the heat of thorns. So, if by pots they mean a device to cook, and if by heat of thorns he means potentially, well, I don't quite know. So let's read this again. Sooner than your pots can feel the heat of thorns. The heat of thorns. So thorn, of course, a plant. I think of a rose and its thorns. And the heat that's associated with that, I think of danger, I think of pain, I think of the warmth of the skin and the inflammation once the skin is pierced by the thorns. So sooner than your pots can feel the heat of thorns. So sooner than your, let's say your cooking utensils can feel pain, or rather potentially through this way of seeing, through this pain, absence of material that is within these pots, whether green or ablaze, may he sweep them away. So, whether in good condition or on fire, or of some rapidly devolving material condition, may he sweep them away. So regardless of their condition. And so my interpretation would be that before it gets to the point where you experience famine or extreme hunger, whether this state prior to destitution, again the famine and the hunger, whether before this condition you were healthy or unhealthy, may he sweep those wicked ones away, the serpents away. And then we resume with the traditional psalmage. The righteous will rejoice when he sees the vengeance. He will bathe his feet in the blood of the wicked. Mankind will say, surely there is a reward for the righteousness. There is a reward for the righteous. Surely there is a God who judges on earth. Psalm 59. Deliver me from my enemies. To the choir master, according to Do Not Destroy, a miktam of David when Saul sent men to watch his house in order to kill them. So I'm not quite sure. We've heard this expression a number of times here before the psalm actually begins. We have the Do Not Destroy. It seems that it's associated with Saul. So it's entirely possible either that it's referring to Saul or is referring to the song that is about that experience. So, not quite sure there. The other thing that I would say is that, not every one of these episodes is going to be completely useful. And especially now, given this new living situation, it's uncertain, of the surrounding environment. And so one has to be a bit careful about how loud one speaks. And I think that this concentration can be somewhat divided at times between worrying about the new surroundings, the new environment, and the task at hand. But of course, the task at hand is all that matters. This is our exploration into the unknown. And our exploration into the unknown should not be allowed to be stopped by these pirates. And so I will continue. Again, Psalm 59. Deliver me from my enemies, O my God. Protect me from those who rise up against me. Deliver me from those who work evil, and save me from bloodthirsty men. For behold, they lie in wait for my life. Fierce men stir up strife against me. For no transgression or sin of mine, O Lord, for no fault of mine, they run and make ready. Awake, come to meet me, and see, you, Lord God of hosts, are God of Israel. Rouse yourself to punish all the nations. Spare none of those who treacherously plot evil. Each evening they come back, howling like dogs, and prowling about the city. There they are, bellowing with their mouths and their swords in their lips. For who, they think, will hear us? But you, O Lord, laugh at them. you hold all the nations in derision. O my strength, I will watch for you. For you, O God, are my fortress. My God, in his steadfast love, will meet me. God will let me look in triumph on my enemies. Kill them not, lest my people forget. Make them totter by your power, and bring them down. O Lord, our shield, for the sin of their mouths, the words of their lips, let them be trapped in their pride. For the cursing and lies that they utter, consume them in wrath, consume them till they are no more, that they may know that God rules over Jacob to the ends of the earth. Each evening they come back, howling like dogs, and prowling in the city. They wander about for food, and growl if they do not get their fill. But I will sing of your strength. I will sing aloud of your steadfast love in the morning. For you have been to me a fortress, and a refuge in the day of my distress. O my strength, I will sing praise to you, for you, O God, are my fortress, the God who shows me steadfast love. So in our mind's eye, what can we make of this psalm? Let's return to the first page here. So when I think about this, I think of surely nothing new in David's experience, as he often struggled with his enemies. Of course, David, a king of Israel, before he became the king of Israel, he had a turbulent rise to his position of leadership. He struggled with his children, and he had no shortage of these experiences, and the Psalms make that certain. But it's not necessarily the historical that we are interested in. We are interested in the truth that he comes to based on his experience, what he's learned from it. Even in, I would say, the pleas that he makes to God, even if he's camped out in some cave somewhere, desperate, trying to hold on to anything that he knows is real, some cause somewhere out there that keeps him going. Some cause that liberates him from the idea of operating under a delusion. Some may consider him to be under delusion. But what can we say of it? So we start with an ask. Deliver me from my enemies, O my God. Protect me from those who rise up against me. Deliver me from those who work evil. And save me from bloodthirsty men. So immediately we have this separation. We have the enemy. We have the individual that's asking God, that's appealing to what he believes to be true, as opposed to what his enemies are appealing to. And he wants to be delivered or freed from the oppression of his enemies, the enemies who wish to do him harm. Deliver me from those who work evil, and save me from bloodthirsty men. And so now on our minds we have the condition, we have the setting of David's mind, this place, perhaps not backed up against the corner, but certainly aware of his many enemies and dangers. And now he's looking for a solution to this problem. He says, "For no transgression or sin of mine, O Lord, for no fault of mine, they run and make ready. So right there, we have some pretty solid reason. We have him recognizing and saying that they have no reason, I have done nothing, for them to pursue me and to violate me, oppress me in this way. And so, if they have no reason to come and get me, I should be innocent in this sort of trial. And so he uses this as a justification. And the next line says, awake, come to me, come to meet me and see. So he's saying, he's appealing to what is true. And he says, if you don't believe me, come and see. Come meet me. Awake. So, increase this attentive capacity, the understanding of this situation. Because I hold the truth in this circumstance. And if I hold it here, then you must be present. Right? Because if God is what he is, and he is love, he is truth, then this situation, God is there somewhere. You, Lord God of hosts, our God of Israel. And he goes into saying again, rouse yourself to punish all the nations, spare none of those who are treacherously plot evil. And it's another one of these psalms, I think, that sometimes I struggle to figure out what exactly I can do to incorporate this sort of into my life. Some of it's difficult, and it feels almost like you're a gold miner in a river with some sifting device. You place it in beneath the water into the dirt beneath. You pull it up and you sift it, and you just hope that some nuggets will come to you. And so I say that because not every psalm registers with me. And sometimes it is quite difficult to find meaning in it. But the reason that we do it is exactly that. It's the practice of finding this meaning. And so if it means that we have to try our best to embody David's experience and to understand what he was going through, I think we can more fully appreciate his approach and why exactly this is included in the Psalms, that is included in the Bible. Each evening they come back, howling like dogs and prowling about the city. There they are, bellowing with their mouths, with swords in their lips. For who, they think, will hear us? So, an interesting series of statements here. So they come back, the evil come back. He compares them to animals. Now this comparison isn't necessarily a good one in terms of the psyche of man. Oftentimes in war, we are reduced to this way of thinking, reducing our fellow man to nothing more than an animal. And that allows us to justify some terrible, terrible actions against them. However, having said that, it's certainly possible. I mean, I've seen it myself. There are no shortage of individuals out there that perhaps in a certain time under a certain influence. They behave quite lowly. And for the statement, each evening they come back, howling like dogs and prowling about the city, I take that. I take both. I take the critique and the comparison to animal and its potential dangers, but I also take the reality of the situation, that these people probably were behaving in a way that was quite antagonistic to the standards of the day. There they are, bellowing with their mouths, with swords in their lips. So the words that they use are sharp. They sting. They cut. For who, they think, will hear us? In other words, it's likely that these are the unbelievers. These are the people that sort of the atheists of the day. They don't quite believe in anything, any particular God, no particular truth, other than whatever drives them at that moment. And then he says, but you, O Lord, laugh at them. You hold all the nations in derision. O my strength, I will watch for you. For you, O my God, are my fortress. And so obviously the Lord would laugh at them because they don't recognize and appreciate what they've been given, the sort of mechanism to understand that there is a more sophisticated way of seeing, more sophisticated way of being. I do like verse 12. For the sin of their mouths, the words of their lips, let them be trapped in their pride. For the cursing and lies that they utter, consume them in wrath, consume them till they are no more, that they may know what God rules over Jacob to the ends of the earth. He's saying because of the things that they say, because of the meaning and the conclusions that their thought process thinks up, let them be trapped in their pride. And pride is this thing of self-inflation, of misplaced self-importance. And to be trapped there is to be blinded by the own ego, to have the boundaries of the self, the walls of the self, so high, so encompassing, so thick, that one cannot hear anything from the outside, cannot see the outside, and quite frankly doesn't need to go outside, because they feel that they have everything in front of them. So that ego of theirs, it becomes their prison. And the words that they speak continue this cycle. It strengthens their resolve to remain in this sort of metaphorical house of blindness. Because why venture out when I can give myself everything? I can satisfy my own mind by uttering things that are completely false. And yet, what does it matter to me? Because what is truth but what I say? And I think this sort of thing is true heresy. Because to have a belief in something, to have faith, at least in this God, is to have faith that there is an objective reality and an objective truth. And so it makes sense that when, after David says, "Let them be trapped in their pride, for cursing and lies that they utter, consume them in wrath, consume them till they are no more, that they may know that God rules over Jacob to the ends of the earth." It's no surprise why David feels that this is something that should be asked of God, because these people will hold Israel down. They will bring it back into a state of greater disorder, of uncertainty, less truth, less godliness. And like a true song, he repeats again, each evening they come back howling like dogs and prowling about the city. They wander about for food and growl if they do not get their fill. So again, this comparison to the animal to indicate that they behave to satisfy their base desires, that they exist just so that they can further their existence, and no more. And for the ancient world, for the ancient people, this was not enough to just exist for existence's sake. They had many thousands of years up to that point to try existing just for existing. Eventually, enough songs and enough poems passed on verbally, I would imagine, of the same old pattern, the same old thing. It gets old. Eventually you have to go higher, find new patterns, more exciting, more richness of life. Psalm 60. He will tread down our foes. To the choir master, according to Shushan, Edith, a Miktam of David, for instruction, when he strove with Aram Naharaim, and with Aram Zobah, and when Job, on his return, struck down 12,000 of Edom in the valley of Salt. O God, you have rejected us, broken our defenses. You have been angry. Oh, restore us. You have made the land to quake. You have torn it open. Repair its breaches, for it totters. You have made your people see hard things. You have given us wine to drink that makes us stagger. You have set up a banner for those who fear you, that they may flee to it from the bow, that your beloved ones may be delivered. Give salvation by your right hand and answer us. God has spoken in his holiness. With exaltation, I will divide up Shechem and portion out the valley of Sukkoth. Gilead is mine, Manasseh is mine, Ephraim is my helmet, Judah is my scepter, Moab is my wash basin. Upon Edom I cast my shoe, over Philistia I shout in triumph. Who will bring me to the fortified city? Who will lead me to Edom? Have you not rejected us, O God? You do not go forth, O God, with our armies, or grant us help against the foe. For vain is the salvation of man. With God we shall do valiantly. It is he who will tread down our foes. So, this is certainly another Job psalm. It's a woe is me almost. And why is this happening to me? When I was reading it, I thought, given its surface content, there is a message beneath. And I think that message is that even though we may complain on the surface, if we maintain a faith beneath it, that there is an answer to the problem that confronts us. Even if we say, you have rejected us and broken our defenses, you have been angry, you have made the land quake, you've torn it open, you have made your people see hard things, you have given us wine to drink that makes us stagger. Even though we may build up the reasons why we are in a particular situation, doesn't mean that we should abandon faith for the solution. Because I think following this reasoning, if we are to be triumphed over by something, it must come from a higher place, even if it's a misdirected good, which we may consider evil. Our response, even if we feel that we have a directed good, it lies on a lower plane. And I think it's our responsibility, if we are to solve new, even if they're problems that seem to befall us that are seemingly at random, or nothing about what we've done could have brought them on, it is still a problem that requires a solution. And that solution requires a higher good, pointed towards the higher purpose and towards the good. And the last comment I'll make about this Psalm 60, is verse 11 and 12, the last two verses. O grant us help against the foe, for vain is the salvation of man. And then he says, with God we shall do valiantly. It is he who will tread down our foes. So, from my reading, my understanding, the word vain, I don't think does not have a very good connotation. Either it's useless, that type of vain, or the vanity that it is sort of a narcissistic conceit. And if that is indeed the case, then it's quite a quick turnaround to verse 12, saying, there's no hope in salvation, but with God we shall do it valiantly. So perhaps there's an interpretation of vain there that I don't understand, or it really is just that quick of a turnaround for his reasoning. Psalm 61. Lead me to the rock. To the choir master with stringed instruments of David. Hear my cry, O God. Listen to my prayer. From the end of the earth, I call to you. When my heart is faint, lead me to the rock that is higher than I, for you have been my refuge, a strong tower against the enemy. Let me dwell in your tent forever. Let me take refuge under the shelter of your wings. For you, O God, have heard my vows. You have given me the heritage of those who fear your name. Prolong the life of the king. May his years endure to all generations. May he be enthroned forever before God. Appoint steadfast love and faithfulness to watch over him. So I will ever sing your praises to your name. as I perform my vows day after day. So, another fairly straightforward psalm here. So we have a commitment to faithfulness. I like the verse 2 from the end of the earth. I call to you when my heart is faint. So it's the call from this place of insecurity to a place of security. Lead me to the rock that is higher than I. Because whatever this uncertainty is from is a new threat to the system that is not quite known. And certainly I can relate to this state of mind that you can find yourself in, that I can find myself in. Just not quite understanding. Not quite being oriented the way that I should be. Not quite directioned. Not quite standing as tall as I should. In that sense, a reorienting is sort of required. I'm not entirely certain how I feel about the rhetoric about the king, because again, the king is a position that God was sort of reluctant to accept. In the story of the Old Testament, and certainly in our modern context, we have done away with the institution altogether. But in that particular context, I think he's referring to the king as the person that leads the people of Israel with the understanding of God's steadfast love behind him. Of course, as we know, through Israel's history, they had certainly plenty of kings that did not do that. And so it's more of a problem of the institution rather than the sort of poetic idea that's put forth here. Psalm 62. My soul waits for God alone. To the choir master, according to Jeduthun, a psalm of David. For God alone my soul waits in silence. From him comes my salvation. He alone is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. I shall not be greatly shaken. How long will all of you attack a man to batter him, like a leaning wall, a tottering fence? They only plan to thrust him down from his high position. They take pleasure in falsehood. They bless with their mouths, but inwardly they curse. For God alone, O my soul, will wait in silence. For my hope is from him. He only is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. I shall not be shaken. O God, rests on my salvation and my glory. My mighty rock, my refuge is God. Trust in him in all times, O people. Pour out your heart before him. God is a refuge for us. Those of low estate are but a breath. Those of high estate are a delusion. In the balance they go up. They are together lighter than a breath. Put no trust in extortion. Set no vain hopes on robbery. If riches increase, set not your heart on them. Once God has spoken, twice have I heard this, that power belongs to God, and that to you, O Lord, belongs steadfast love. For you will render to a man according to his work. So plenty of good things in this psalm, especially coming off the last couple. There's a lot of meaning, I think, in a few of these verses. So first and foremost, the obvious thing that stands out is this continual return to the pillar that is God, the sort of security, the safety. And also this refrain of the soul, this waiting of the soul to be certain. For God alone my soul waits in silence. From him comes my salvation. And I like that. I can't recall how many times I've been in a position where I'm feeling restless. My soul is just restless. It's just pure, anxious nothingness. I can't put a thought together. And there's no rock. There's nothing to anchor it, to stabilize it. The soul is just quivering into sort of the existential nothingness. The anxiety I may have good reason to be anxious, maybe not, it might just be a state of mind. But either way, the soul is just open to all sorts of corruptibility, to the anxiety of the uncontrolled mind. And here we see, for God alone my soul waits in silence. From him comes my salvation. He alone is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. I shall not be greatly shaken. And so we could see this sort of control of that inner disturbance because of faith in the truth, in the ultimate form of stability and knowing, intelligibility. It's a comforting thought. And certainly it's a useful practice. And then we return again to the enemies, of course. How long will all of you attack a man to batter him, like a leaning wall, a tottering fence? They only plan to thrust him down from his high position. They take pleasure in falsehood. They bless with their mouths, but inwardly they curse. So in other words, this man has been pushed to the point of instability, and yet they continue. They take pleasure. They continue because they take pleasure in what they're doing. And I like the statement about falsehood. They only plan to thrust him down from his high position. They take pleasure in falsehood. They bless their mouths, but inwardly they curse. They bless with their mouths, but inwardly they curse. Again, much of the Bible, whether you're looking at a macrocosm or a microcosm, you can flip it, and it can apply just as much to the self and the sort of inward dialogue and conversation as it can between King David and his subjects. And I think about all the times that I've said things that were contrary to the sort of inner feelings. And it's not necessarily that the inward curse, just because it exists, means that's the way that it should be, or that's the way that it is in totality. I think before one is to speak, they should resolve the reasons why the curses exist, where the curses come from, and when it's brought up to its proper place, given a good solution, then one can speak, because then they will speak truth. The sufferings of man are not everywhere the same. if we were to believe this ethical hierarchy, we can get stuck at every single rung of this totem pole. And I have to believe that the higher up we get stuck, the greater the suffering, because it's a larger question. It's a larger question we ask of ourselves. It's a larger question that we ask of the divine. In moments of when we are challenged and we find ourselves being pulled away from our place of comfort and support, it's at these times that I think these questions arise. That certainly is not the only time, but these questions are apt to flow into our minds at seemingly the most disadvantaged situations possible. When strength is needed most, we are confronted by our strongest weaknesses. But again, comes in faith, and it says no, away with the weakness, towards the strength. Because the weakness will pull you down, the strength will take you up. In my opinion, the best verse here is verse 9. Those of low estate are but a breath. Those of high estate are a delusion. In the balances, they go up. They are together lighter than a breath. And so this is, I think, quite a dense statement. Those of low estate are but a breath. And so what does it mean to be of low estate? In my mind, I think of a person who is of low wealth, perhaps doesn't own any land or property. A person like myself, I should say. Those of low estate are but a breath, meaning that it's fleeting, it's quick, short. A breath, it really doesn't mean much in the greater context of things. Perhaps that's not to say that the individual of low estate doesn't mean anything, but their influence on the broader scale is less. And I think we can extend this to say those of low estate perhaps can be of low value if we separate it from its material meaning and we plug into this low estate the general sense, the state of man's mind. And if this is low, then certainly his conception of reality, his conception of what the good is, of what God is, of what love is, will certainly be of a lower status. And his life, his thoughts, will be, surely, but a breath. Those of high estate are a delusion. That is to say that once a person finds themselves elevated, whether materially or otherwise, they think highly of themselves. And instead of giving praise where proper praise is due, they give it back to themselves in this sort of narcissistic feedback loop. A delusion. In balances, they go up. So I'm not entirely sure what this means. So on a balance, it could be like a weighted balance. Where you have a person of low estate on one, a person of high estate on the other. The balance is an equalizing. In the balances, they go up. They are together lighter than a breath. So both of these, the one of the low estate and the one of the high estate, both of these, the meaning behind both of these is negative. So I'm not entirely sure what it means by in the balances they go up. They are lighter, they are together lighter than a breath. That makes more sense to me. Because to be something that is lighter than a breath is almost something that is less than temporary, It's a quick, fleeting thing. And together, these are the sort of the lost souls. Again, whether it's because of a material condition, feeding into some narcissistic delusion, or otherwise. They are together lighter than a breath. Then verse 10, put no trust in extortion. Set no vain hopes on robbery. If riches increase, set not your heart on them. Once God has spoken, twice have I heard this, that power belongs to God, and that to you, O Lord, belongs steadfast love, for you will render to a man according to his work. And I think this sort of goes along with some of the reasoning that we had earlier. In verse 10, there's the mention of, if riches increase, set not your heart on them, because it's not the proper place that you put it. You put it in God. Once God has spoken, then again, twice have I heard this, that the power belongs to God. Again, everything in its proper place. If everything is in its proper place, we will come into alignment. We will have that feeling of security, stability, a firm base of support. And that to you, O Lord, belongs steadfast love. And this last statement, which I think requires tremendous faith, for you will render to a man according to his work. Because there are no shortage of things that can come in to this and seem almost accidental, random, arbitrary. For you will render to a man according to his work. And I could see a case where good work is not compensated monetarily. And that's a difficult thing, I think, to sift through. Because in our modern culture, much of our value is placed on money. And certainly if that's not the true value of things, the true way of things, if it's not placed in its proper place, then of course we will be those of low estate, or those of high estate but are lost in some delusion. So I think we're going to stop there. We're going to continue next time with Psalm 63. My soul thirsts for you. A psalm of David when he was in the wilderness of Judah.